George W. Bush, the president who led America through crisis. Introduction. An unlikely leader. George Walker Bush was born on July 6, 1946, in New Haven, Connecticut, into one of America's most prominent political dynasties. As the eldest son of future President George H.W. Bush and Barbara Bush, young Dubia seemed destined for public service, yet his path to the presidency was anything but predictable, marked by personal struggles, business failures, spiritual transformation, and ultimately, leadership during some of America's darkest hours. Early life and education. Bush's childhood was shaped by Texas oil culture. When he was just 2 years old, his family moved from Connecticut to Odessa, Texas, where his father began a career in the oil industry. The family settled in Midland, where young George grew up playing baseball and dreaming of becoming a professional athlete. In 1953, tragedy struck when his younger sister Robin died of leukemia at age 3, an event that profoundly affected the 7-year-old George, who wasn't told about her illness until after her death. Following family tradition, Bush attended Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts, where he struggled academically but excelled socially, even serving as head cheerleader his senior year. He then enrolled at Yale University, graduating in 1968 with a degree in history, though he famously joked years later about his mediocre grades, telling Yale graduates, "And to the C students, I say you too can be President of the United States." During the Vietnam War, Bush joined the Texas Air National Guard in May 1968, and serving as an F-102 fighter pilot until 1973. His service record would later become controversial during his presidential campaigns, with critics questioning whether he received preferential treatment and fulfilled all his obligations. After his discharge, Bush earned an MBA from Harvard Business School in 1975, becoming the first U.S. president to hold an MBA degree. Personal transformation. The period following business school marked what Bush himself called his nomadic years. He returned to Texas to work in the oil industry, founding Arbusto Energy in 1977. That same year, he met Laura Welch, a teacher and librarian, at a backyard barbecue. They married just 3 months later, and in 1981, Laura gave birth to twin daughters, Barbara and Jenna. Bush's oil ventures struggled through the 1980s, but a more profound transformation was occurring personally. In 1986, shortly after his 40th birthday, Bush quit drinking alcohol completely, describing how he realized alcohol was beginning to crowd out my energies. He credited this change partly to a 1985 meeting with Reverend Billy Graham and his recommitment to Christian faith, which had a profound impact on his life. This spiritual awakening would shape his personal philosophy and later his political identity as a compassionate conservative. Political rise. Bush's entry into politics began humbly. In 1978, he ran unsuccessfully for the U.S. House of Representatives. After this defeat, he purchased the Texas Rangers baseball team in 1989, serving as managing general partner for 5 years, a role that raised his public profile significantly. In 1993, the Bush challenged popular Democratic Governor Ann Richards, focusing on education reform, juvenile justice, welfare, and tort reform. His victory stunned much of the nation. He won re-election by a landslide in 1998, and that victory helped launch him into the 2000 presidential race. The 2000 presidential election remains one of the most controversial in American history. Bush defeated Senator John McCain for the Republican nomination, then faced Vice President Al Gore in the general election. The result hinged on Florida. Due to the closeness of the vote, a recount was conducted and contested in federal court. In a controversial decision, the Supreme Court ordered Florida to stop a subsequent recount. Bush won the Electoral College with 271 votes, although he lost the popular vote to Gore. The defining moment, September 11, 2001. Bush's presidency changed forever on September 11, 2001. On that morning, enemies of freedom committed an act of war against America when terrorists hijacked 4 airplanes, crashing 2 into the World Trade Center towers in New York City, 1 into the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, and a 4th into a field in Pennsylvania after passengers fought back. Nearly 3,000 Americans died in the deadliest attack on American soil since Pearl Harbor. The Bush presidency changed dramatically with the events of September 11th. In his address to Congress on September 20, 2001, Bush delivered an ultimatum to the Taliban government of Afghanistan. Deliver all al-Qaeda leaders, release foreign nationals, close terrorist training camps, and give the United States full access to verify their closure. When the Taliban refused, Bush launched Operation Enduring Freedom. By early November, Special Forces and the Northern Alliance had liberated major northern Afghan cities. Hamid Karzai joined with Marines to take Kandahar on December 7, 2001, forcing remaining Taliban and al-Qaeda members to flee. The swift military victory seemed to validate Bush's decisive response. The Iraq War, a controversial legacy. Bush had been considering how to deal with Iraq since his first National Security Council meeting months before 9/11. The administration considered Saddam Hussein's regime a dangerous threat due to potential weapons of mass destruction. Vice President Dick Cheney and Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld advocated for regime change, while Secretary of State Colin Powell urged caution. After the administration's public education effort, the Congress authorized the president to use force against Iraq. On March 19, 2003, U.S. and British forces launched strikes on government installations. A ground invasion followed, and although the regime collapsed quickly and the United States won decisive battlefield victories, Iraq soon descended into sectarian violence. The failure to find weapons of mass destruction undermined Bush's credibility. The occupation proved far more costly in lives and resources than anticipated. By 2006, public support for the war had eroded significantly. Bush's approval ratings, which had soared to 90% after 9/11, plummeted below 30%. Domestic policy and challenges. Despite the focus on foreign policy, Bush achieved significant domestic initiatives. One of his administration's early major initiatives was the No Child Left Behind Act, which aimed to measure and close the gap between rich and poor student performance. This landmark education initiative passed with broad bipartisan support, including Senator Ted Kennedy, and was signed into law in early 2002. Bush also championed Medicare Part D, providing prescription drug coverage for seniors, the largest expansion of Medicare since its creation. He implemented substantial tax cuts in 2001 and 2003, reducing individual income tax rates and doubling the child tax credit. However, Hurricane Katrina in August 2005 exposed critical weaknesses in federal disaster response. Bush's delayed reaction and the government's inadequate response to the devastation in New Orleans severely damaged his presidency's reputation. The financial crisis. Bush's final year in office was dominated by economic catastrophe, and the housing bubble peaked and burst, followed by the worsening subprime mortgage crisis and Great Recession. In September 2008, Lehman Brothers declared bankruptcy, triggering market-wide panic. Although Bush generally opposed too much government involvement in the economy, he supported a strong government response to the crisis, working with Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson to propose legislation. In October, Bush signed the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act, which established the Troubled Assets Relief Program. TARP authorized $700 billion to stabilize banks, restart credit markets, support the U.S. auto industry, and help Americans avoid foreclosure. The House initially rejected TARP in a 228 to 205 vote. After the Dow Jones dropped 778 points, the largest single-day drop in history, both chambers passed the legislation. While TARP eventually helped stabilize the financial system and most funds were repaid with interest, the deep recession continued well into Barack Obama's presidency. Post-presidency and legacy. Bush left office in January 2009 with historically low approval ratings. He retired to Texas, deliberately avoiding public criticism of his successor. He remains actively involved through the George W. Bush Institute, emphasizing education, global health, human freedom, and support of the military. He also discovered a passion for painting, creating portraits of world leaders and American veterans. Conclusion: a complex legacy. George W. Bush's presidency defies simple assessment. His response to 9/11 united the nation and prevented subsequent attacks on American soil for the remainder of his term. Yet the Iraq War, based on faulty intelligence, cost thousands of American lives and trillions of dollars. His education reforms expanded federal involvement in schools. His financial crisis response, though controversial, prevented total economic collapse. Since 9/11, there have been no attacks on American soil during Bush's presidency, and the United States and allies disrupted key terrorist plots around the world. 50 million people were liberated through removal of 2 totalitarian regimes. Yet these victories came at enormous human and financial cost. History's judgment on George W. Bush remains divided. Some view him as a decisive wartime leader who protected America. Others see a president whose judgment failures led to unnecessary war and economic crisis. What's undeniable is that few presidents faced such consequential crises, and fewer still will be studied, debated, and reassessed as intensely in the decades to come. Bush himself acknowledged the complexity of his legacy. When he returned to Texas in 2009, he insisted his presidency had been a joyful experience, leaving history to render its final verdict on the tumultuous 8 years that transformed both America and the world.